Man, is there anything cooler than an old Learjet with tip tanks? I don't think so. Hey everybody, it's Kurt. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to check out the FlightSimWare Lear 35. It's one of my recent favorites. I don't fly a lot of jets, as I think anyone who watches my channel already knows. When I do fly jets, I like small, stable, round gauge planes. This one's a lot of fun, although it gets away from me sometimes. I did this flight from San Diego up to Santa Barbara so we could talk a little bit about it. We're going to take the Padre 2 departure from San Diego, and the Pitbull arrival into Santa Barbara wasn't fully available in the Garmin 530 for some reason, so we're going to abbreviate that and kind of do vectors into the ILS at Santa Barbara. It'll probably go really rough since I don't fly this plane enough, and half the time I miss the autopilot capture, and then I end up hand flying an ugly approach because I'm not a jet pilot. Anyway, that's the plan. I think most of you know that I don't like to waste your time with a bunch of procedural junk, so I'm going to skip over a lot of the finer points here. But this airplane is a very realistic Learjet. If you're not familiar with it, you're going to need to read up and be familiar with the locations of all your switches and whatnot. There's a lot to know about it. There's a lot of manual processes that you may not be used to, and if you miss some of them, they can really mess you up. I'll try to touch on some of them, but this is an overview and not a deep dive, so no promises that I'm going to hit everything. One thing that bears mentioning, though, is that if you hang around on the Discord for FlightSimWare, one of the things you see a lot is people claiming there's a bug with the plane, and most of the time it's that they didn't follow the checklist or don't know what they're doing. If you download a realistic airplane for your flight sim, expect it to be realistic, expect to have to do your homework, and don't expect to be able to fly it well if you haven't taken the time to familiarize yourself with it. Over at the FlightSimWare Discord, there's a lot of knowledgeable people, including some real Learjet pilots who can help you out, but leave your pride at the door. Some people have a kind of negative reaction to finding out that they've been doing something wrong. And make sure to bring complete details of what you have done. It makes it much easier for people who are trying to help you out if they know exactly what you're doing. Everything you need to do is in the tablet here, standard FlightSimWare stuff. Whoops. One of the things I don't like about FlightSimWare's approach to these tablets is that your payload is defined by, like you set these individual people and they're at these fixed weights and stuff. In the Cessna 414, you're stuck with that. In this one, you can turn that off. There's an option, where'd that thing go? Payload sync can be turned off and on. And what that does is says, I just want to set my payload via the flight sim interface. So you can do that in this plane. Nice thing they added to it. I wish they'd put that on the 414 as well, because I really dislike being stuck with their, whatever they jam in the box. Anyhow, so GPUs here. You also have your controls for doors and things. I don't know if you noticed on the intro, cabin doors open. So we'll close that up. Send the ground power unit away. And that's it for in there. Well, looks like they're not leaving, but whatever. I don't need them anymore. All right, so I'm going to run through this. It's all going to be wrong. If you're a Learjet pilot, you're probably going to cry, but away we go. Batteries are already on. I'm going to go ahead and start up inverters so we have full power on everything. What else do we got that we're going to need? We're going to want stall warnings on before we get out of here, so we'll just switch those on now. Stand by on the emergency battery, autopilot, leave radio off for now. Avionics should be off for takeoff. I already programmed our route. Don't want to waste your time with that. We'll turn that off for now. And fuel is pretty easy on this guy. You just have the two main jet pumps here. They're already on and ready to go. And so we'll believe we're ready to fire it up. So we'll set engine to start. A pretty automatic process for this thing. Starting to see some turbine speed coming up here. Temperature's coming up. Fan speed's coming up. Everything looks good. Yeah, we peaked at about 725 there. Let that engine stabilize. All right, that one's looking pretty good. Let's switch him on to generator so he can provide us some juice. And we'll get the other one going. Everything's coming up normally. One of the things with the FlightSimWare jets that I like is they don't always behave exactly the same. Like this one peaked just a little lower than the other engines, so that's great. And in flight, you'll see that they aren't always exactly the same. It's a lot more realistic, I think, than some of the stuff we see from others. All right, let's get that generator up. And takeoff trim is not set. So let's go ahead and set our trim. I don't, this is the pitch gauge here, and I don't know why it always goes to all the way down. Given how much they've done with this plane to get it right, it wouldn't surprise me if that's a behavior of the real plane. But let's set that to takeoff. That's done. Power up the yaw dampener. We can get our avionics on at this point. Sorry, I had a couple switches here that I need to reset. Beacon wasn't on because I'm a bad man. It's on now. Nav lights are on now. If there's anything else we're missing down here, I don't think so. One of the things with the Lear is it has a the front wheel steering is disconnectable. So what you typically do is, you know, when you're on the taxiways, when you're down to taxi speed, you turn the steering on, and when you get out onto the runway, you turn it off, and you'll steer with rudder. The button is right here. I have it mapped onto my button box, so I don't have to look down there to do that. And when you get the steering on, you'll get the green light here. So that's your indication that you've got that system turned on. And when that's on, you'll get the pitch trim warning over here. So both those things kind of indicate that it's in that mode. Let's get a initial altitude. We're just going to loosely fly the Padre departure out of San Diego. I'm not going to stick to this stuff too strictly. We're not using any ATC today or anything. Padre 2, okay. So after departure, we'll pick up Winfield, Colonel, Gwen, Padre, and San Diego. Heading to right here, Winfield, across Gwen at 8,000, and on track. Okay, that's really the only key one there. Then is Gwen at 8,000 and 520 before we make our. I stupidly left the charts screen up, and I had to re-record this afterwards, so if it sounds a little different, that's why. But all I covered that was really important is the air pressurization system. The way that works, just real quick, it's kind of manual. This dial here sets what your pressure is going to be. So the smaller numbers along the bottom here are your intended cruise altitude in thousands. So what you would do is, like, if you're going to 28,000 feet, you'd set this to about 29 or 30. You always set it a little higher than you're really going to go. Bottom line in thousands there. This switch, cabin air, needs to be on. That's what actually pressurizes the plane. And if you don't turn that on, you're going to get to listen to the the cabin altitude warning once you go over 10,000 feet. And the only way to get that warning to go away is with this knob over here. You turn it to whichever failure is happening. So in this case, it would be cabin altitude, and then you would do the horn silence here, and that would shut it up. But it's not permanent. It only stays off for, you know, I think it's like 45 seconds, and then it's going to start screaming at you again. So just remember this switch. When you land, you then, when you start your descent, you would dial in the airport altitude up here. This is again in thousands. So like for Santa Barbara, it's at sea level. So we would just dial this down to sea level, like that. That's the only things we lost, and I now return you to the original video. Lear is eager to go. You'll end up riding the brakes a little bit. Very powerful for its size and extremely fast. You'll want to be quite cautious on your departure, as it's real easy to overrun speeds and altitudes. Ground handling on this airplane's super easy. As long as you remember to turn the steering on. If you don't do that, you will be in for some nasty surprises. Let's go ahead and get our heading mode on. Leave everything else as is. I believe we want to get the altitude selector armed. And I'm probably calling all these the wrong things. Aside from the steering button, another important one to map is the Learjet has a maneuver button on the yoke, and the way that thing works is when you're in any autopilot mode, if you want to make a manual input, which you will do pretty regularly, you hold that button, and while you're holding it, the plane's flying manually. And when you release it, it's kind of like a pause on the autopilot. I have it set to a toggle, so I can just click it and then hand fly until I'm ready to click it again. What the heck? You just saw that shadow take off on 9. We don't take off on 9 here. FSLTL, you silly. Okay, we're going to ignore that. We're doing our own thing. So, into the runway, we'll get our strobes on, we'll get our landing lights on. We're going to get the pitot heats on. It should shut up all the lights up here. Anything else I'm forgetting here? I'm going to put the hydraulic pump on. It just seems like a good idea. I don't know if that's procedure in this plane or not. Everything else, I believe we're good. The radio altimeter on. Marker beacon's low. That's fine. Nice L heat. Nice warm summer day. I don't think we're going to need that. Don't need any of the heat on anything else up here. Alright, let's get going. And we'll put first notch flaps in. I believe that's 8 degrees on the Lear. Should be more than enough. We're light. Yeah, we get centered up here. One of the things I wanted to say, you need to make sure of your settings for your different modes. You need to have, they're down here. So when you pick up your ILS, you'll switch to that over here. And you also have your CDI settings. Of course, 530 acts as it normally does. But a little bit more manual than some of the things you might be used to in this plane. So at this point, we want to turn the steering off, which again is the button down below. Have it up here. Steering's off. Altitude selector's armed. Everything's good, I think. Start to spool it up. Just kind of bring it up gently. Don't just slam it. It steers normally on the runway once it gets a little airflow going. Rotate. Throttle's back. Gear up. Oh, sorry, I'm all over the place as predicted. That was fun. Alright, we're going to do autopilot on nav. Alright, now I'm just letting the speed climb, and then we'll go ahead and set our airspeed. Flaps are up. And indicated airspeed. So this is an old school autopilot. You don't really have a dial for your indicated or for your airspeed for the autopilot. You kind of fly it to the speed you want and then engage it, and it'll remember that. That's the way a lot of the autopilot functions work in this guy. And we're about to 8,000 feet now. It's leveling off. Go ahead and back off the throttles. We're going to blow right through 250 here if we don't do that. Altitude, we'll set our 28,000 in. Alright, we have 28,000 dialed in, and as soon as it completes the turn here, I'm going to go ahead and engage the maneuver button, which will allow me to have control of the plane for a bit here. Autopilot's back on, putting it back into speed hold. at 250. We're through 10,000 feet. We get our strobes off, our landing lights off. Through 18,000. Set our barometer to our altimeter back to 29902. If you forget to set your pressurization and turn on the cabin air here, you will get the most irritating alarm sound there ever was. And the only way to do anything about it is to get the cabin air pressure above 10,000 feet or get the airplane below 10,000 feet, as you like. Down here, this knob that's kind of behind the throttle, you can set it to these different functions. Like, for instance, if you set it to cabin altitude, and then this horn silence switch here will silence it temporarily, but if you don't correct the situation, it's going to come back. So that's what that system does. It's got stall, Mach, a bunch of different things down there that you might want to be able to silence. Coming up on 25,000 now. We'll be leveling at 28,000, and we'll need to remember to back out of the throttle. There's no auto throttle on this plane. If my memory is right, I believe about 87% N1 or so usually maintains pretty good cruise. We'll fiddle with it when we get there. Now, I think in the real practice for this airplane, cruise settings are done on turbine temperature. Alright, so we've got about 86% N1, holding, we're slowing slightly. I was aiming for Mach 0.7, so we'll see where it stabilizes here. I have this airplane configured so that when I come back past my idle detent, the thrust reversers come on and it automatically arms these. If you don't have a function like that, you need to know that in this airplane you will want to, well, you'll have to arm the thrust reversers prior to using them. The other thing I've already done is set the ILS for Santa Barbara 110.3 on the nav. So at this point we know we're going to be beginning our descent pretty soon, so I'm going to set our pressurization to sea level. Cabin altitude now is only about 1,000 feet. The Learjet has really pretty aggressive pressurization, so you can fly pretty high before it really starts to get a low cabin altitude. Okay, our leg is changed over. We've got 10 minutes to get down to 7,000 feet, so 20,000 feet to lose in 10 minutes, so that'd be 2,000 foot per minute. There's no reason to start the descent just yet. I'm going to go ahead and dial in 6,900 here. I think what I'm going to do is aim for about a 3,000 foot per minute descent. We'll start from about 7 minutes to go. So we're at 8 minutes 50 to the next waypoint. So in just a minute here, we'll get going. Another thing to talk about with this plane is the airspeed indicator bug. It's not connected to the autopilot, so it's just a reference for you, and you can dial it to whatever you want to remember. For those of you that aren't used to these old school airspeed needles, the Mach ring will adjust itself based on pressure, altitude, and everything. So the outer ring is Mach, the inner is indicated airspeed knots. Alright, so it's about time to get set up for our descent. I'm going to go ahead and say we'll just maintain about 250, which is already what we're doing in knots. So we'll just adjust here until I get 3,000-ish feet per minute on my descent. A little bit more. Usually somewhere between like 70 and 73 is about what I end up descending at. That'd be N1. We're not flying in VATSIM, but according to them, the altimeter up there is 3005, so we'll be coming Not going to be doing any intermediate stops, so we can go ahead and dial that in now. 005. Vertical speed changed a bit while I wasn't paying attention, so we're a little higher than I had intended. I'm reducing the throttle just a little bit to get that descent coming a little quicker. We've got 4 minutes 30 to get there and 10,000 to go. Alright, for altitude. I'm going to add our throttle back in. I don't remember the setting for kind of slow cruise like this, or low altitude, so I'm just tinkering with it. Want to keep it below 250, but at this point not too slow. 30 seconds from Quang, and after that we're going to go down to 2800, so I'm dialing in 2800 now. Okay, looks like that speed's holding at about 75% N1. And there we are at Quang, so I get my altitude selector armed. And we want to hold speed. Alright, we're at home, so now we're going to go to heading mode. And we're going to come down to 2,400 feet. Alright, final approach course is 075, so I'm going to dial that in on our course here. And we are receiving Santa Barbara on the localizer indicated right down here. Now we'll get that notch of flaps in. Yeah, we're going to go direct. Go ahead. No, not runway 7. Why would you assume that? No, 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 no. Alright, well, instead, since I've screwed something up, we're going to go heading 343 to pick up the ILS course. And we'll switch off of GPS nav at this point. Alright, everything's armed to pick up the... crud. How come we... No, we're not above the... Okay, localizer's coming in, plane's intercepting that just fine. Blur back to about 160. Waiting on glide slope. Slope's coming in. Okay, I was looking at the gauge wrong right here, so that's all looking great. Landing gear down now. Alright, got green lights. About 130. Degrees flaps in right now. We'll go to landing flaps here in a moment. Putting in that last notch of flaps. And maintain it about 120. I wasn't expecting actual conditions here. Lazy. Hey, I see an approach light out there. Don't have the runway for... Okay, runway's coming into sight. Think. Yeah. A little bumpy. I'll let the autopilot keep doing its thing till we're at about 400 here. Woo! To check the winds. Alright, through 400, autopilot off. Yeah, we're getting knocked around a bit here. It doesn't want to descend. Get a little long. Woo, woo, woo. Got a little nutty. Well, that wasn't my cleanest one ever, but whatever. Nobody's perfect. Especially me. Right, steering back on. Always remember that, or you get to the edge of the runway and wonder why it won't turn. Flaps coming up. Strobes off. Landing lights off. So I got tied up in that weird banking thing that happened right before touchdown, and didn't deploy spoilers, didn't get my reversers going early. All these are reasons why, or proof that I was never a jet pilot. All right, parking brake set. Nav lights off, avionics off. Inverters off. And all you gotta do to turn the engines off on this guy is kill the pumps. Generators off. Alright. Batteries off. Beacon off. And that's it. Alright, so that's the FlightSimWare Lear 35 for Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's a fantastic add-on if you like your jets complicated and old. I hope you learned something today, and hopefully we'll see you back here in the future. But that's it for now. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.